add my voice to this very important international instrument aiming to protect the lot of the domestic worker. Now, to many of us that are born in urban centers, we always refer to our own children as highly privileged. Why? Because for many children that grew up in Karukura, for you to wear a pajama, sleeping clothes, these would be clothes that would come from the urban centers, from domestic workers, neighbors. Your mother would bring it along and you would have pajamas. Now our children at the age of 1, 2, they have a gown. I remember when I was growing up, I said, my first pay, I'll go and buy myself a pajama. Because you couldn't have it. So domestic workers have played a very important role in raising. I did a white one for that matter. But what I'm trying to say is that, Honorable Speaker, yes, the instrument is talking about the abuse of domestic workers. But I want us also to elevate the debate a little bit, to address the core needs of the domestic workers. See, domestic workers in their nature is the fact that the majority of them, or 99.2%, are women. That comes into the urban centers, bigger houses, of course, due to those that can afford. Domestic workers are people that are a little bit better off. And they come into these jobs without any form of security. Any form of security whatsoever. I remember a woman that co-raised me, a neighbor, because when we grew up in Karukura, the whole street was your parents. Everybody was your father, mother. Any person could order you, send you to shop at will. But this woman raised me, her name is Konsa. And she was a domestic worker for so many, many years. And at the time when she had to retire, all she was left with was just a government pension. Working for the last 49 years in Windhoek, from the old location, Auckland Park, traversed the whole suburbs of Windhoek. And when she got back home to go and retire, there was nothing for her, and there is nothing at this point in time for a domestic worker. And I think that is my intervention. That we really need to make sure that the financial sector plays a supporting role in bringing instruments, financial instruments, that helps the lot of domestic workers. Many domestic workers do not even have bank accounts. I remember my childhood of domestic workers putting their money in their breast or in their headgear, Herero woman. And this was the only savings that they could maintain, was a piggy bank where they put their money. And every time they go, they come back, the biggest accusation that they are accused of for so many years is that they are taking a bit of bread or butter from homes. Of course, we have experience of those rogue domestic workers that takes your perfume and so forth. But the majority of them are people that are saving us, saving our children. Most of the time, our own children are not raised by us. They are raised by domestic workers. So when it comes to financial instruments, access to retirement funds, we need to create even an insurance scheme to help domestic workers so that when they go on retirement, they have something. Secondly, and the Speaker agrees, he's raised in Karukura, in the old location.
Actually, the Honourable Fernande is making me wanting to intervene.
Yes. Honourable Speaker, the other issue that I want to raise, that is quite very central to me, is the question of access to health facilities, access to a health care that can be able to take care of our people. Now we might disagree, and the whole world has a great disagreement on how best to address the health conundrum and access to health and a freer, accessible health sector. But I tell you, even employers, you don't want to force it on employers, but those that can, and if those financial institutions such as insurance schemes can also create some small insurance schemes to help our people have access to health facilities. Many domestic workers are suffering from diabetes, they're suffering from high blood pressure, the standing of ironing and cleaning for so many years. But these are people that do not have access to some of these very important facilities. Then fundamentally is the question of a fair wage. It is very difficult to address a fair wage amid the conundrum of an world economic recession and our own country's economic recession and COVID-19 pandemic. But one shouldn't turn a blind eye to the fact that are domestic workers really getting a fair share as opposed to the cost of living that they are living. And it's one issue as legislators that we need to always address periodically and review it to make sure that we also give due recognition to domestic workers in terms of access to a fair wage. And most of the time, we have a tendency, probably it's the human psychology of selfishness, that if you are told that the fair wage of a domestic worker is 1,500, very few people want to add a 2,000. Even if you know that your own children, when they go to the mall with $1,000 or $500, they come the next Saturday and ask you for more. But you want another person's mother to earn that 1,500 because that's the threshold. So we should also, as a legislature, do more for the domestic worker to address their pay. But I want to fundamentally now close off by addressing the instrument in its entirety. Honorable Minister of Labour, I want to congratulate you for having brought this instrument to the House for our ratification. But we also need concomitant laws that also protects this instrument, because if you are saying we are ratifying an international instrument of this magnitude, our laws should also be compatible to address some of these issues. Now the question of domestic violence is also a great concern to domestic workers. Because where you have an abusing husband who abuses the wife, this abuse always trickles down to the domestic worker. Because if you are looking for your beer and the beer is not in the fridge, and the domestic worker, Sarah, or whoever that person is, or Martha, or whatever, would be asked, where is my beer? And if the house is beaten for the non-availability of the beer, most of the times we also see domestic workers being abused by fathers in homes. Secondly, the raging war on the domestic violence, raping of men, raping your own daughters. These are things that we are hearing, that apparently a man can be attracted to a 10-year-old child. But what are we talking about? So there is a need to protect the domestic worker in the house. And one of the things that we are lacking in this country is reporting mechanism. The reason why we are not beating domestic violence is the fact that our reporting mechanism is socially perceived as a taboo. When a woman comes and reports a case that John is beating me at the police, the first encounter is that the police would laugh at this woman. The very first encounter that you have with the police is that, this one, is he talking the truth?
Sometimes they say they don't want to interfere.
And they don't want to interfere. It's because of our society. When we marry our girls off, and the girls come home and she tells you, Daddy, John is beating me. You, the father, talks about protecting the legacy of the Venanis. The Venani never walks away from a marriage. Go back. You are sending somebody to a death cell because the honor of your family is much more important to society than your own daughter's life. So it is true that domestic workers do not have it easy. Now, there is also a gray line, and I want to say it with all necessary decorum and respect, that sometimes there is also these frivolous accusations that are never true. Sometimes you tell a person to do something, come to work on time, do ABCD. But if you pressure this person to do just the work, sometimes employers are also told that it's because he or she wants me, therefore he is treating me this way. So it is important at arbitration that we also look at both balances. We need to balance that arbitration is also mature and fair in investigating. Because society is packed in such a way that if you hear that Honorable Venani or Honorable whoever has raped, of course he's a man, he can be able to rape. No person would say, any man who is accused of rape, the general belief is that, of course, he's a man, he could have raped. No person would say, is it really true? There was a very interesting case, Honorable Speaker, in our society it is a taboo, but in America, a woman won a case who took residue in a condom, put it in her body, and she fathered the child through this process. She didn't sleep with the man. She took the man to court, and she won a case of 2.7 million. That man is the father of that child, and the courts of America allowed it. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, there are abuses in our homes. There are abuses of women in this country. We can't deny it. And I want to speak to the men folks directly. If we do not call up for men conferences, consultations with our chiefs, with our church leaders, there is something not right with men. Oh, point of too long talking. Yes. Are you part of the problem? Now what I'm trying to say is that some of these things, as you are reading a newspaper, you are raping someone's 10-month-old baby. You are beating someone's daughter, she has a broken arm. And you still want to be viewed, you are a man in society. What kind of a man are you? In fact, we must be ashamed. We must be ashamed that we are the persons that must protect the weak in society.
It's not a question of being a man, it's whether you're a human being.
A human being. We must be ashamed of the fact that men are supposed to be protectors of women, but we no longer protect them. If you have a bit of income, and it's so selfish, apparently because you have a salary, the other person must only be on your whims. She must be abused because she needs hair from you or she needs a cell phone from you, therefore they abuse. Colleagues, don't give my daughters money if you don't mean it well. Don't stand behind the fact that I bought her a golf, therefore I want to kill her.
Exactly.
Don't take my daughter to school if you can't afford her. Just don't kill her. And I think we as men, as legislators, we need to ponder this issue of domestic violence. Because all these instruments are not necessary to have them, had we behave like proper human beings. With these few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support the instrument. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now you are provoking the Speaker, and I'm going to restrain myself. I'm not going to get involved. But one of the things that I really wanted to draw a line on is the characterization of domestic worker. Is that really, can we not improve upon things like that? This is a vital service. If you look at the number of people who are working in that sector, and we still downplay it to that extent, I'm not going to go beyond that, just to make an observation. The other interesting issue for me is the